It's actually, have you spoken to any of the 97% of scientists who have consensus? 97% of the scientists
Is science decided by consensus?
Are bought and paid
Is science
for.
a consensus issue?
You know, that's it. You know, their funders are there.
Is science a consensus question?
I'm sorry, CO2. CO2 is vital for life. It is. And we need it for plants. We need it for plants. Because they produce oxygen.
How much CO2 is dangerous?
No, how much CO2 do we want?
Well, we can survive in, for example, a submarine has about 8,000 parts of CO2. And we're talking about present world 420
Parts of CO2.
parts of CO2. Yeah. So we can survive perfectly well in quite a lot more CO2. Yes, as humans, CO2 is not dangerous for humans unless exceptionally high levels. But that's not the argument of Extinction Rebellion. The argument of Extinction Rebellion is that the climate is affected by increasing CO2.
Yes, so
it's not the argument that CO2 is a deadly gas, surely.
Increasing climate.
I heard you say that you need carbon dioxide for life.
You do, yeah.
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 Animals,
Yes.
even
Yeah.
plants,
Yeah.
you put it out.
So why do we demonise CO2?
Why do we
Because
need it
the
for life?
natural carbon dioxide cycle is a set cycle that looks after itself. Where's wrong is we're piling billions of tons of extra CO2, which is not being
Why do
taken
farmers
off.
use
CO2 to make plants grow,
yes,
yeah.
exactly. Why do they use CO2 in an unnatural way, pumping it into greenhouses to create more growth for their plants?
Well, that's a small amount, and I doubt.
No, they'll put in large amounts actually, 3-4 times the level in the normal atmosphere.
But I mean, you can look at little examples and say CO2 needs that. But what is happening? The world does not need billions of extra carbon dioxide. It's not just carbon dioxide, it's methane.
What is it then? Okay, methane.
Also,
Methane is produced in large quantities by termites, for example. Methane's a far
not the sort of large, you can't.
yeah more than man's CO2 emissions in terms of its influence on
if you're taking
a warming effect.
natural cycle,
Yeah.
and then saying the natural cycle justifies a massive man-produced.
Well, but I mean CO2 has been many times higher than what it is now.
No, it hasn't.
It has
No.
in the Carboniferous period, for
And
example,
CO2
throughout
doesn't
human
cause
history.
climate to, the climate
And
to
the
change.
climate's been a lot warmer as well in
And
the past.
it doesn't cause our climate to warm. What's causing our climate to warm is the natural cycles, solar cycles.
That's not.
Well, how can you tell?
It has been for millennia.
How can you tell?
It has not been this warm.
How can you tell?
Solar cycles.
How can you tell?
No, I can't. But 99% of scientists around the world.
Is science a consensus issue? Is science a consensus issue? Is science decided by consensus? No, I'm saying, is science a consensus issue? So if I put forward a hypothesis and everyone agrees with me, for example, the king has got clothes. If I say the emperor's got clothes and everyone agrees with it, does that make it true?
It's not based on hypothesis. It's based on observation. It's based on measurements. It's based on factual
there are, for example,
you will obviously never agree.
well, but that's the point of discussion, isn't it? Or are you saying it's not right to discuss with people who disagree with you?
It's not a discussion. If you've got something.
It is a discussion.
If you say this pavement is,
Wait.
and I say no, it's not. It's grey, and you say it's pink, and I say it's grey. That's not a discussion.
Well, but that's not the discussion we're having.
Well, it is.
We're discussing CO2 and the impact of that on the climate.
No, we're not. That's not a
And we don't have that in front of us like you're saying. It's not like
We do have it. Where were you on Tuesday and Wednesday? We have it in front of us.
You mean when there's a hot day that means
Not
that's
just a hot
evidence
day.
for
That's not just-
CO2?
It's an
I mean,
extreme
you
example.
could argue, except that hot weather would indicate that the climate is warming. You could indicate that. I don't know. I haven't seen the exact stats on that. But you can't therefore extrapolate from that hot weather is caused by CO2. You can't extrapolate that. I mean, I know there are arguments in favour of it, but I don't think they're that strong.
They haven't made that extrapolation. They know that the more
Who's they?
People who have measured it, scientists. People who know.
Did you believe? Can I just ask you a separate question? 58.
58.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 77.
Right.
I've been around 20 years
Right.
longer than you.
Yeah.
And I know that the climate has changed.
Well, of course it changes, but the question is it driven by CO2? Well, it may be getting warmer, but it's naturally getting warmer, then it's irrelevant.
The extra greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
Okay, let's assume you're
I
right.
don't want to do this anymore.
Okay, never mind.
Trying to find out.
Okay, I'd like to ask this banner person here what that means.
Just spread that amongst people going backwards.
We're going to get into the square, sit Nelson, and then we're going to sit down right opposite the Parliament. Okay?
So can I ask you about your placard?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. If you want to show it to the screen, subject access it is, yeah? So it's got 978 days left, amendable. Yeah. So what does that mean to you, the idea of there being 3 years, I think it is, or how many years? 3 years. What does that mean to you?
So this is the number of days that the UN says that we have left.
Why do you believe the UN?
We need to hit peak emissions.
Right.
So by that point, we need to drastically reduce our emissions if we want to do anything.
Left
about
for
it.
what? Left. What do you mean by left?
This
What-
is the
what
number
do you
of days
think?
until the
Right.
date that the UN has said we need to hit peak emissions. So in 2025, we need to hit peak emissions, then drastically reduce if we want to stop rapid onset climate change.
Okay, and the consequence of not doing that would be what, in your opinion?
Rapid onset climate change.
Yeah, meaning?
Meaning mass starvation, meaning mass migration of humans, losing entire ecosystems.
Okay, and what do you think, if the world is in such a danger, such peril, what do you think, what type of actions do you think are justified? What would the means to the end be?
Yeah, so civil resistance, mass civil resistance, showing the government that we shouldn't be investing in any new fossil fuels. We only have this limited amount of time left. We need to do something about climate change, and how we're going to do that is through civil resistance.
But if you were correct, and if the UN is correct, and that the risks to humanity and life on Earth are so desperate, what type of other measures might be viable? For example, if we were down to 8 days, would it be viable or legitimate to engage in terroristic type activities, or blowing things up, or kidnapping officials, or what would be justified?
We're a non-violent organisation.
But if it was
Throughout
8 days to go?
Throughout history, even within violent movements, they're not shown to be nearly as successful as non-violent. Even if there's 8 days left, 1 day's left, the answer isn't violence through that.
Okay. So non-violence, okay. But within the parameters of non-violence, for example, I mean, I had a discussion once with Roger Hallam, and he was saying, okay, you need basically to get everyone arrested. So would that be then, what tactic would be applicable the closer you come to doomsday?
It would...
How do you think you should escalate?
Well, exactly what we're planning to do, blocking governments, making it absolutely impossible for the government to not listen to us and to not acknowledge that they are willingly hurtling us towards societal collapse.
Okay. And the authority of the UN, do you think it's legitimate? So, for example, in the record of the UN on many other issues, do you think that's a legitimate structure to be believing in, or...?
It's also reported by the IPCC,
which is a UN body.
Said, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to believe in these top scientists that are saying, they're saying that we only have these amount of days left.
Okay.
They've had years of research within this.
One supplementary question.
Yeah.
Did you believe the narrative about coronavirus by the scientists, by the government and the scientists?
I believe coronavirus is a real thing and it's killed millions of people around the world.
Listen, but the narrative, I mean, for example, the government kept saying, we're following the science, we're following the science. Did you not feel that was something wrong with it? Like Matt Hancock and, you know.
Yeah, well, I think...
or do you just think they're hypocrites?
I do think how the Tories acted within the coronavirus pandemic, yeah, they were being hypocrites. They were being, yeah.
All right, thanks very much.
Thanks
What was your name?
Rosie.
Okay, it's on subject access, yeah?
Cheers.
There is something to that. You're about to do it. It's
Man-made climate change does not exist. And we'll get people stopping there about that. We'll also have a walk. Yeah. The main production of CO2 in the world is from Southern Africa, from the soil. There's graphs in the back. Come over the back. You'll find it very interesting.
and you have to use it.
Come on, read it, guys. Read it. Have you? Have you read that? All right.
Do you want to take the microphone and debate?
No, we haven't.
He doesn't want to debate. Do you want to offer you? Do you want to take the microphone? Do you want to take the microphone and say? Do you want to take the microphone and just debate? Do you want to debate?
We'll try.
Scientific debate.
Yeah, why don't you debate?
Scientific debate.
He's prepared to debate.
Scientific debate.
2 minutes each, say. 2 minutes each, say.
Ask us a question.
Does land use change the climate? Does the removal of vast amounts of organic matter like woodland change the climate?
Yeah, change of land use to an extent will change climate.
So therefore man-made climate change is
No,
man-made.
it doesn't change climate. It changes things in the short term.
It says climate.
Well, okay, if you want to call it climate.
So that's man-made climate change.
Well, of a sort, yeah.
But there's no,
No, well,
okay. We're talking about the gas issues. No, it's a fair comment.
That's a fair point, yeah.
Right, okay. Well,
It's a fair comment. We don't disagree with you. No, it's good.
there's more things than just carbon dioxide.
Do you want to go supplementary then? Do you want to go
Fair enough,
supplementary?
but the CO2 issue is not things right.
No, it's everything. That's why it's about the cost of living crisis. Is a systemic,
Well,
it's an ecological,
cost of living is
economic
going
crisis.
up because of the COVID con, of course. That's what's brought it up. And the increase of oil prices, which comes about from these campaigns.
Do you want to give it the mic a bit?
All right. Yeah, so it's good to acknowledge other land use by human causes is causing climate change.
Yeah, he did acknowledge that. He did acknowledge that.
Well,
But supplementary?
Take a leave,
No, what?
Supplemental, yeah.
Sorry, mate. You want to say something? This is just really ridiculous, you know. I don't think people actually understand the seriousness of this situation. Our world. Hello?
Go on.
Hello? Oh, I thought I got cut off there. Alright, I'm alright. This world is getting out of hand. I don't think people really understand the seriousness of this problem. Do you understand? We are dying. Our people are dying.
What problem?
You understand?
What problem?
The problem is reparations for Jamaica. You know, it's a very big problem and a very big issue. And you know, the Tories, they cannot dance. If you can't dance, then you've got no vibe.
It's not
That
XR.
means you can't help us. You can't help us. You've got no energy. And we need energy, 100% natural energy. Cut out the gas, cut out the oil, CO2. You understand?
It's the gas of life.
To eat, yes, of course. Photosynthesis.
Hooray!
Hooray! Say no to oil. Just give us a round of applause.
Why are you opposed to oil? Why are you opposed to oil? Why are you opposed to oil? Why? Why are you opposed to oil?
Why am I opposed to oil?
Yeah.
Thank you for your contribution.
Correct, no, you know, say, yeah, man, I really know nothing about this conversation.
Why?
But you
Why?
know, say we're up in the place and everything nice
Why not?
and lively, you know?
Why can't you? Why are you opposed to oil?
You know what?
You made the statement. It's reasonable to ask it.
Rastaman, we is against anything pig, any type of pig, meat, natural, plant. Everything shall be natural and plant-based.
Yeah, that's fine.
You understand? Because we don't believe in them things that will mash up the earth and mash up the system. And we understand we want natural things. Everything natural.
But isn't oil natural?
Oil is natural, but the things what the people them a do with the oil is not natural.
Well, they make clothes, for example.
They might use the oil for them car.
They might.
all
No,
mashing up the
that's
earth and
reasonable.
mashing up
That's
the ground.
what is done with something is an important question,
Yes.
right? But that doesn't mean the oil itself is not
No,
natural.
the
Oil is natural,
good,
isn't
it's
it?
natural.
But oil is natural,
But
isn't it?
they might use the oil for the wrong things. They might frag it.
That's fair enough.
They might
I mean-
take it from the ground.
I mean, I'm not disputing
Yeah,
that
man.
the misuse of resources is an
it's
important
not
issue,
good.
right?
There's so many other
That's
ways
fine.
you can use
That's
that
fine.
gas.
That's fine. But does that mean that the oil itself is a
No,
negative thing?
oil
It's a
is
natural.
natural.
It's natural, exactly.
It's natural.
Right.
You know, it's just disrespectful what they might do with it. You understand? We don't feel
I
like
think that's
them
fine.
use
I think that's
it.
fine. I
You
don't think we
understand?
disagree on that. The
But
question is, you know, what? Okay.
big up on yourself.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
We want to put up a table there.
Over there, you want to get. You want to push that debate thing because it works. There's a couple of people coming to talk. You get any debate going. It's great. That's what you want. Yeah, go right into the middle of them. Forget about hiding away. You don't mind.
I think we should go over there and put up a table, give out more leaflets, and then go to the left.
Go to the middle of them.
There, what?
Exactly. We agreed to go to the next demo for 1 o'clock, and they want to put up here. They're not going to wait for us. We're going to miss the whole demo.
Maybe they're confused, I don't know. We go over there, we'll play around with the table a bit,
Oh,
I
no,
don't
they're
know
on
where
the
they'll
march. They're
go,
on the march, mate.
and then we go to Buckingham Palace that way.
I don't know. It's going to be gone already. Check where.
No, they won't be. Well, we can phone them. I don't think no, I'll
Check
have
online.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Stay with us.
He's
You're in charge of the...
flogging your picture.
I just requested us over there, put a table down there, and there's some more people, and do a debate, and then we go to the left to the Buckingham Palace.
There can be no debate.
So we should better start.
How you doing?
Anyway, well, not illegal.
You all right?
Okay, yeah. Crazy visible, okay. I could not come last month because they canceled the one I meant to come for the strike, you remember?
Yeah.
They canceled for the following week.
So tell me, off camera, what's the atmosphere like in hospital now? What are the nurses and doctors saying? No, it's not on camera. We're off. We're facing that way. But I've got your voice.
At the moment, is the thing is we don't have internal simmers anymore about how many people have COVID. Okay? So it's very confusing because they don't give it any explications anymore. So
What about the organisation in the hospital? Because, for example, this week, you might have seen the news, that guy Eric Levy died, and there were all sorts of restrictions imposed in the hospital by the doctors that made people extremely suspicious about the way the doctors had behaved and his treatment and so on. And is there a bureaucratic collapse in the hospitals so that they just decide things without really taking account of the real needs of the
well,
patient?
this thing is no one communicate anymore in the hospital, and we don't see anything because there are no internal simmers. So we don't know what is
internal
going on. There are no internal simmers to talk about COVID.
Oh, okay.
So we used to have internal simmers, and every day said, oh, we have 100 people with COVID or 50 people with COVID. We used to have an email telling what is going on. Now the emails, it doesn't say how many people we
I
have.
see, okay.
So people, we don't know.
Okay. But then, I mean, there was are the doctors then still reorganising the wards and things like that in order to bureaucratically deal with what they think is infections, and are they testing the patients all the time, or how is this now governing? How does it
Well, they
influence
think-
the shaping of the internal structure
They
of the
think
hospital?
everybody I know in the hospital, they have like a normal day, like nothing happened.
Yeah.
So there is no panicking anymore.
Right,
Because we are not aware of the image so 100 people and it's the world is in the mind.
Right.
Now everything is so relaxing that really it's like nothing happened.
Right. And what about the attitude of the staff? Does that mean staff are beginning to question what they were told, or is it just, oh, forget about it?
I
now
think they
it's-
forgot about it.
Yeah, okay.
I think they forgot about it. Most people I know.
And what about access to patients? Are there restrictions on access to patients
No,
imposed,
not
or
at the moment.
nothing?
Not at the moment, no. Not at
But
the
that's
moment.
funny because they did that with Eric in UCH.
That's in this hospital. And in another hospital, there is no everything
Different
is back to
method.
normal.
I
Yeah.
see.
I think every hospital they has their own policies.
Right.
So what happened in one hospital,
Right.
someone decided that, but not all the hospitals.
And who are the people who decide these things in hospitals?
Well, I suppose it's a chief executive and the
Right.
non-executive.
Right.
And the doctors, they decided as they.
Are they like political appointments or economic appointments, or what?
I
I don't know.
I don't know because they will not telling us, and we are not going to question them.
Right.
When you have your uniform,
Right.
you work, and you try your best.
So how dictatorial is the power inside the hospitals? Like, how much can you question the decisions of a
I don't
consultant?
think the thing is they will. You don't have anyone to ask, no one to support, and you don't see anything. So there's no group to say, oh, I can complain or I can see something. Everybody's going with the wind.
Right. Okay.
So it's like nothing.
And if you do
happening.
complain to someone,
Well, I did make a few complaints and I wrote emails, but
Right.
they never replies about my issues. They
Right.
reply something different.
Right.
So I don't want to realize.
so they bypass it and they
Yeah. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
shove it under the carpet.
They do.
Yeah.
So what they do is just send an email, you say, well, I have concerns about something. They are not going to raise a concern or send you an email back
Right.
about, oh, you raised a concern about COVID or
Right.
safety or
Right.
something. They
Right.
will not compliments they say.
Right.
But they will answer different emails. So there is no way where you can talk to anyone.
So it's like talking to a brick wall, effectively,
Well, exactly.
with,
Yeah,
with a
it's
little
very
bit of bounce in it, but
yeah,
not much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. And now because we don't know what is going on, and as they said a few weeks ago, on
Okay.
the,
If someone dies because of a bad decision by the doctors, what sort of chance does a patient, or does a family member or a patient or a friend have of challenging it?
everybody can challenge anything and everything, but the question is how far you can get, and if you get the right person to helping you out.
Right.
But the thing is,
And that has to be someone internal to the hospital, or does someone put someone put their job on the line if they do that, or?
of course, but if it's someone is something is wrong, you're going forward, you try your best because you are there to bring the truth and to say, look, there's concerns and worries, I want to say it.
Right.
But this thing is so big that people are afraid. I think they go with the wind. They see something and they don't talk.
Right. Gone with the Wind being our theme for the day.
Exactly. And now because they don't get you so much information about anything,
Yeah.
everything is hiding, but it's still working because you cannot complain, you cannot do anything.
Yeah.
It's there, and only the big ones, the ones that are really involved, they can do something. We don't know what is going on.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Okay.
Well,
Well, I'm not sure where they've gone now. I think they've gone down to that demo. No, that sounds like them down there, doesn't it? Maybe there's an amp down there. We should go and join that other demo in a minute.
it's very difficult because when you talk to people, they are working in the world. They have normal life. They go out, they eat, they drink. You working with people that has COVID.
Yeah.
You do normal life
Yeah.
because they don't communicate with us anymore.
Yeah.
So we don't know what is going on. So you're going to work, you do your job,
Yeah.
and you can in home. As simple as that.
Yeah.
But obviously, some hospitals are different.
Yeah.
Every hospital has different policies, different attitude, but not all of them they are the same.
Okay.
Carbon dioxide is the gas of life. Carbon dioxide levels are controlled by temperature. That is shown by 20,000 years of data. And here we have a pamphlet to spell it out. So please, people, if we don't have civilization based on science, we have fascism. This is what happened in Hitler's Germany. The scientists were silenced, and then they had a racist theory. We know what happened in Russia too. They silenced scientists to produce fake science. We've got to have democracy to ensure science. We've got to have science to ensure democracy. If anyone here is prepared to debate, please do so. Or arrange a debate in future. We'll come anywhere, any time. Man-made climate change does not exist. It's a term to control you. It's one of the 6 legs of the New World Order. The New World Order, that cockroach. The 6 legs are the virus pod, the climate pod, or the war pod. They launch a war every so often to control you, to get you to accept what amounts to rationing. That's what they want. And then we have the jabs. Jabs are interfering in your body. Then we have control. They are to control you and also to make you ill. And the lesson that people do is physical ID. And they're using you to introduce carbon footprinting by digital ID. The digital ID is to control you. Don't go along with it. That's the
IPCC report. You know better than all those scientists.
I'm not saying I know better, I'm saying I act with integrity and in an honourable fashion.
And what are you saying I don't?
No, I'm saying the IPCC, the United Nations, every war zone in the world has got United Nations people in it. You know, they seem to be like the, what's it called? The commonality, they seem to be they're everywhere. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not being paranoid.
I don't quite understand what you're saying. What I see
I'm saying they're not to be trusted.
Well, we trusted the scientists when we went about COVID, or maybe you didn't.
No,
okay,
definitely not.
So
what science did you trust there?
Sorry?
What science did you trust there? Because we can talk about that.
So the science I trust, I suppose, is from the IPCC report.
Yeah, but that's not about COVID.
Warning us about the differences happening in the climate.
But that's not written by scientists, is it?
Yes.
It's not.
Yes, it is.
The IPCC is not a scientific body.
Yes, it is.
It's not.
Yes, it's
a political board.
It's a political body.
No, it's
a political body, informed by people, some of whom are scientists, but it's not a scientific body. It's a report for the government.
Yes, and the governments have to sign off, and it's the scientists in their
but do you trust governments?
No, I trust the scientists. And then
but the scientists informing the governments are paid by some people and selected by some people. A lot of them are not. A lot of them have no climate-related scientific skills whatsoever.
So I trust what the IPCC report.
You trust the bureaucracies.
Why do you trust them?
Because I trust the scientists.
But you said a minute ago you trusted the COVID science. Yeah. Which scientist did you trust most of all amongst them?
Amongst them, I don't know. I can't name any scientists.
Well, Neil Ferguson, did you trust him?
Can I just go back to another point?
Okay.
It's not just the scientists that inform the IPCC. I can look around me and I can see that.
I agree.
I can see that glaciers are melting, forest fires, temperatures are going up.
Well, that's not what you see around you. That's what's selected and broadcast on television by some people, correctly or wrongly. It is selected.
I was in 40 degrees in Bristol.
Yeah, and how many times?
How many times?
How many times have you been in 40 degrees? Right, exactly. So once.
So that's the first heat wave
so
we've
once.
had.
Yeah. Have you never been in 40 anywhere else in the world?
Yes.
I've been to Spain. Well, what about it? What about it? Every day the temperature is every day of your life the temperature is different.
So you're not worried about this climate change at all?
I mean, I don't like it when it's particularly cold. It's bad for human health. Lots of people die. And when it's warm, a couple of days warm. It's all it was with 2 days. Yeah? If you think it's going to be 2 months, okay, maybe you got a point. But there's no real evidence for that, is there?
Temperatures are going to go up, aren't they?
Well, that would be nice, but I don't think there's any guarantee of that.
That would be nice.
Well, it would be nice.
When you look at all the data, you see it going like that.
The hockey stick.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So do you not?
But it depends how you examine the hockey stick, doesn't it? If you're looking at 1 degree or 2 degrees and then saying hockey stick is that, then you're going to find a hockey stick. If on the other side you're looking long-term trends or even trends since 1940, then there is no real hockey stick. 1940, 1975, the temperature went down at the peak period of increased CO2. It did. Well, that's a fact, though. There you go, man, alright? You're putting on weight, look, he's putting on weight.
Oh, no.
We're fucking eating McDonald's.
Eh?
We're eating McDonald's.
Mate, you don't want to know. It was a month for fucking McD's, mate.
Sorry about that.
No, you're alright, thanks for that. Saves me wasting my energy. Excuse me,
Interesting future of my planet, that's good. So you get knocked over the other day. You always get knocked over though. It's like Mr. Knockover. Weebles wobble but they don't fall down, that's you.
Jeremy is very good on history. He knows loads of history. Jeremy's a fantastic, knowledge around history and politics. But on this stuff, it's not
Like they think COVID and climate, New World Order, World Economic Forum.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with
that?
It serves the interests of the global capitalists. They're foolish idiots who.
What's wrong with that?
Because climate change is the outcome of capitalist exploitation.
Let's take it to the next level. Assuming that your belief system was.
I don't have a belief system. Anti-capitalism. So anti-capitalism. That's my belief system.
That's fine, but if the system that we're under is producing, if the system we're under is producing a deadly climate change, and XR people are saying tell the truth to the newspapers and so on, does that mean there should be no space whatsoever for disagreement with that narrative?
Well, we've seen in the last week climate denial on the front page of the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Daily Express.
So should it be banned?
The oligarch controlled
should it be banned?
Well, no, doesn't need to be banned.
But what are you complaining about then?
The oligarch controlled media are
the oligarch controlled media push both points of view. In my opinion, I think that's not true. But in any case, in your opinion, do you think, if that is true what you're saying, do you think that denial of climate crisis or climate change or global warming is the actual basic argument that's being given, CO2 driven global warming, do you think that should be forbidden? The argument that is not correct.
Well, no, that's nonsense. And also, why would that's? But when you have
to what degree should it be permitted? Because if you're saying the Daily Mail put it in there, it's a climate denial story.
Because they're owned by billionaires.
So but there are billionaires who own other newspapers and say different things. But let's.
Name one newspaper that's owned by.
The Guardian newspaper.
Owned by billionaires.
Well, I mean,
obviously Bill Gates has his hands all over it.
I mean, there are television stations, CNN, right across the world. The point, however, is slightly different. I'm not disputing that there are billionaires who own newspapers and mass media. What I'm saying is, to what degree do you think?
Why are you saying that?
Because the term denial, right, implies a prohibition of that narrative. So, in your opinion, should that narrative, in other words, people saying, "Oh, it's only a hot day," should that be banned?
How would it be banned?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Well, no, but you're the one suggesting.
I'm asking it.
Explain to me
because,
how
for example, under the coronavirus legislation and under coronavirus powers, the WHO and local and national authorities, if you disagree with them on coronavirus, you're not allowed on YouTube. You're banned from YouTube, right? And social media have applied quite similar processes in a number of things. Well, some use little marks, but YouTube bans you, right? YouTube takes them down, right? Now, is that legitimate?
Well, that's the thing. To say, in my opinion, everyone should be free to say whatever they like. Whatever they like, it should be free to say. But even if it is misinformation, be free to say that. But then it's about, should we be giving them a platform? So if it's something that is potentially harmful. Like, we know now without there's no uncertainty that human-induced climate change is a thing. Like, it's scientific. It's a fact. It's confirmed.
Well, I think that's disputed, but
It's not though. Your opinion.
the terms used by XR and by the UN, IPCC, and so on, is that the overwhelming majority, some people say 97% of scientists say climate change is man-made. That still leaves 3%.
No, it doesn't.
There's nobody who denies it.
It's over 99%.
Okay, even if it was 99%, it still leaves 1%.
Fossil fuel companies have
and
funded
1%
studies.
can sometimes be right.
Yes, but not when they're funded by fossil fuel companies.
Well,
we know they have
but
been.
there is a
You're
climate
serving
science.
dark money interests.
I'm what?
But you're by pushing.
I'm not
COVID
putting anything.
climate
I'm
denial.
asking you
No, I know, but
what the
you're
parameters are
I know.
as to the permission for free speech.
Coming at this with a neutral attitude, are you?
Well, I am because I have encountered lots of people who say 99% of people say that the world's going to be destroyed. I ask people.
You accept the reality of anthropogenic climate change.
I don't think it's likely to be the dominant factor in climate. But well, it's not at odds with the science. I've got a training in research, right? I've got a PhD, so you could call me a scientist if you want, but I don't want to go on about that. The point being, I have a training in research. I haven't researched sufficient, and I've looked at a lot of papers on climate science, so-called, but I've not been convinced by the arguments. Now, it is arguments. All things are. Even Einstein's theory of relativity is an argument. Newton's theory of gravity is an argument. Right?
You don't seem to understand the scientific definition of a theory.
Well, what is a science in your opinion? What's the meaning of science?
Scientific theory.
What is the meaning?
Hypothesis, and then all the available evidence confirms that hypothesis as the best explanation. Then we call it a theory.
Well, there is, however, an additional component to that, and that is that you know what the internal refutability of your theoretical principle is. So Karl Popper argued science is about refutability. You must know what could refute your argument. So in other words, the precondition for scientific thinking is to say, I'm going to jump into that 1% theory. And I'm going to think, is that possible? So what do you think would disprove that theory? That man-made climate change is happening? What would disprove it, in your opinion?
What do you, when you say, it's like
that
saying
would make it
what
that
would
would allow it to be scientific.
Okay, so let me like a comparison that maybe is useful. It's like saying what would disprove evolution through natural selection at this point. Or what would disprove the theory that babies are born out, from wombs after semen and eggs are combined? Yeah, these are all scientific theories, but they're now so overwhelmingly confirmed by everything.
Well, some species, just to throw a little bit of confusion into one issue you just raised, some species auto-regenerate without sexual transmission. Yeah? Some species, seahorses for example, can reproduce themselves without insemination.
Such an overwhelming, not even evidence, when just like the reality that you live in is discernible to quite a good extent.
You mean your empirical experience, you mean?
Yeah, like
so a hot day, you mean, like that?
Well, not even that. Just like when something is within, like science is all about models. There's no ultimate proof in science. It's not about ultimate truth. It's about a functional model.
But surely the model must have a refutability component.
No, of course.
Yeah?
That's why we've had.
So if it's a model, for example, like Neil Ferguson's models were refuted by fact.
Yeah,
right?
lots of scientific models have
over
been
decades.
abandoned.
Right. So what would for you be what would for you, even though you think it's out of the box, what would for you be a refutation of the theory that man-made climate change happens? What would refute it for you?
Well, I don't see, given what I understand of the reality we live in.
I'm saying that's the criteria for science.
Because
is
the greenhouse.
What type of data
would you? Data that disproves what we have at this moment in time. So
but I don't think that's I don't think that's physically possible. No,
well, it's not about whether you think it's going to happen. You obviously don't think it's going to happen. But what would be the criteria of data that would disprove that theory that you're promoting today?
When something has been confirmed to a certain point, unless like there's some sort of Deus Ex Machina intervention, there could be something that we. I'm not going to.
So, for example, if let's take the hockey stick theory of Michael Mann, yeah?
It's not a theory. Like that's not Michael.
It is a theory. It is a theory. It's a theory. It's a theory that the hockey stick is caused by man-made CO2 emissions causing warming. That's the theory, right?
So the greenhouse effect.
Now,
the idea
if
that, like, intensified carbon in the atmosphere traps.
That's the argument. That's the argument.
Very basic
well,
science.
That's the argument.
Like layman level physics. But yeah,
that's the argument. Now, what could refute that argument?
It's not an argument.
It is.
It's like saying what could refute the argument that greenhouses make plants hotter than being outside the greenhouse. It's a reality that is just like you couldn't refute that because you can see it's happening in front of your eyes.
So you're not arguing for refutable theory. You're not arguing. That means you're not. I'm trying to give you the leeway to answer that. The gentleman tempted to. I don't think you're answering it.
If I said to you, what can refute the greenhouse theory of plant growing, what would you say? So the fact that
well, what really makes plants grow?
Yes. The glass traps the heat.
Yeah.
It provides a warmer temperature to grow crops you otherwise couldn't grow in that country. That's greenhouse theory.
Okay. Well,
what could refute greenhouse theory?
Well, you can. Let me think about it. I think the refutation would be if there were a number of other factors which were not to do with the greenhouse, which led to those plants growing effectively. So you could have a control group, one group of plants growing outside of the greenhouse, one group of plants growing inside. And I think what you'd find is, I'm not certain, but I think what you'd find is that different types of plants would react differently. Some would grow more effectively in a greenhouse and others not. One factor, just a little sideline, it's a bit unfair, but I'm going to do it anyway, is generally in greenhouses, farmers put CO2 into the greenhouse to make the plants grow faster. So the argument is, and NASA, if you look on the NASA website, you look at NASA greening of the Earth, CO2 is determined by NASA to be, they're not the only authority in the world, but they are an important authority. They say that the world has become more and more green over the last 30 years because of man-made CO2 emissions. And the greening of the Earth, it's often been argued that the greening of the Earth is a precondition for, if you like, contradicting the increase in climate, if there is an increase in climate. So NASA have argued that. Yeah? Now, it might be that if you put more CO2 in the air, you got more plants, and they would act as some sort of sink for CO2. I don't know.
That would be great, and that would be the case. But if you have rapid enough heating, that means plants that have adapted to a certain spectrum of climatic conditions will die en masse.
So if you had, say, a 20-year period of cooling in the climate while you had increasing CO2 emissions, would that contradict the argument?
Well, obviously, these are talking about long-term trends.
If over 25 years, from now until 25 years' time, the temperature went down and CO2 emissions went up, would that, if you like, refute or potentially refute the argument?
Well, yeah, because that would suggest that the greenhouse effect that you've agreed, like you acknowledge happens with plants, isn't real.
Right, but did you know that between 1940 and 1975 that was the case? The temperature on the planet went down and CO2 emissions went up. It went down slightly, but it did go down, while CO2 emissions were rising significantly. Well, it's all very marginal, but I don't know. But you can check it. You can check that. It's not a disputed. It's not disputed. Yeah, but the point is this: it is that the methodology was the issue. So I argued about what's refutability.
Since 1990.
Well, that may well be. Maybe there's an explanation
of increased emissions.
The legend, the person that turned the Sarah Everard vigil from a peaceful protest into a violent occasion.
Well, wasn't that how we won the right to demonstrate? Isn't that how we won the right to demonstrate? Isn't that how we won the right to demonstrate?
Imagine being so detached you don't even know what you did.
So you're saying I lead. You're saying I led all those women. You're saying women are not capable of standing up for their own feet. I don't think so.
What I'm getting from your general argument is very reductionist.
Which is what? Thanks very much.
Focusing on very specific.
Well, the issue. Just quickly to recap, because you weren't there when I discussed it with him. If it is science that's being defended here, what is the refutability? What is the thing which might refute that scientific argument. That's what Popper said. I mean, you don't have to accept Popper, but Popper, in discussion on what the philosophy of science is, says science can only be science if it knows its own internal, what would refute it internally. So what would refute it? So, for example, that's why I said 25 years of declining temperatures when CO2 is rising, would that not be a refutation?
Everything else would need to be equal.
Right. So in other words, the multiple factors external to CO2 might be ignored otherwise. Right. When is that ever going to be possible?
To totally refute it, you wouldn't be able to.
but then you don't have a scientific argument.
I don't want to be on camera.
Go on. Okay. Yeah.
The probability is very high.
Okay, that's fine. Probability and science are not the same thing. But anyway, go on.
What's the So what would say it's not true? Man-made climate change. What's the next 100 years look like? Like, do we just carry on exactly like we have?
No, I mean, someone came up to me and they were saying about capitalism. I don't support capitalism. I support the end of capitalism. But I think most of the arguments being given that I encounter around climate change issues are not challenging capitalism anyway. They're saying that the issue is so imminent that it overrides the needs for social struggles to overthrow capitalism, or better said, it's the primary and the others are secondary. So, for example, the idea of class struggle or socialist struggle or that type of thing, whether you agree with it or not, those are anti-capitalist philosophies. But this is a philosophy that certainly is being adopted by large layers of the capitalist class.
So, does it do
and it gets public subsidy.
But do you think that? I guess my thing is like, hearing you talk is like, we either believe this and we make everything more sustainable, or we don't believe it and we don't make things more sustainable.
Well, I mean,
doesn't seem like
both of my sons are architects, and when they were at university, the buzzword was sustainability, and it pretty much meant anything you like. Anything you like that calls itself sustainable gets funding, basically.
What it really means is the smallest circles of I've got my bag here.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah,
the smallest cycles, yeah, go on.
Smallest cycles of reproduction sort of thing. So whether it's recycling.
But if it's like a jungle,
I don't see the bad in it. You see, I don't see if things like recycling are getting public funding, but so's the oil industry. It's like I don't see the bad.
Why is the oil industry bad? I know it sounds stupid, but why is it bad?
It's a fair question. Because well, from what I think, because it takes things out of the earth that belong to all of us and belong to the earth, and it takes the commons and they become privatised, and it hurts the planet, and most people don't gain anything from it, and there is an alternative. There are alternatives.
In terms of what? You mean in terms of
transport?
Of power?
No, there are alternatives to using oil in many areas. Not all areas, but many areas.
Yeah, but I mean like clothing
so if we turn off... I don't see... So you're arguing that the climate change isn't real, but I don't understand...
I'm not saying climate change isn't real. Climate change is a permanent finite feature of man-made climate change. I don't think it's proven.
I don't see how that's... So I think that argument's only going to last like 5 years, but then we have to actually come up with... You're going to spend the next 5 years of your life or whatever arguing against these people, but then where's that going to...
It's only a parcel.
Yeah. But then what's the? I guess behind this, there is green philosophies, right?
But the green philosophies. I mean, I remember.
Behind not believing it, what philosophies are?
I remember the green philosophies in the 1970s, and at that time, Petra Kelly and others from Germany who sort of launched the modern green movement. They were very much about people's democracy, control from below, and this sort of thing, and challenging environmental destruction, which I'm all in favour of. But it seems to me now that maybe not the fault of the people here, probably not, or the people who believe in environmental causes and so on, but it seems to become a dogmatic thing that serves certain, big corporate interests and big institutional interests to promote an agenda that basically argues that state subsidies should be thrown at private corporations in order to make themselves green.
So where should they be thrown?
I think they should be thrown into the welfare of the people, improvements in their lives, that sort of thing, rather than climate adjustments.
I personally, I just don't see how not believing climate change is going to lead to man-made climate change leads to anything good. Whereas this, even if this is wrong, it leads to so many great ideas, so many new inventions. I don't understand how the stance is. Yeah, if that makes sense. I don't understand what philosophies your camp is going to offer the world that's actually going to help in any way. Whereas in here there are thousands of ideas of making stuff out of different stuff, different types of recycling, there's all these ideas.
I mean, I don't have any problem with ideas being developed by people who are involved in movements in particular. I came down to a lot of the first Extinction Rebellion protests and so on and discuss with people there. The point is I want to engage in that discussion. I don't believe that any scientific development can take place when people do not discuss and people do not engage with people from a different point of view.
Yeah. So is your angle? Because I do wonder,
I know Piers Corbyn very well, but I've discussed with him about these climate issues and so on. I'm relatively ambivalent on the question whether climate is warming. I'm not convinced by the evidence presented by the other side, by the supporters of the theory, and I'm very weary of the people who are sort of key backers in the world. I'm very weary of them.
What, so like Bill Gates?
Yes, and the combination between them. I mean, on the COVID issue.
So I guess I'm wondering. Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
What harm in your personal life? Yeah. What harm is this ideology doing the most to you?
I think it's laying the
except a bit of money from the government that you wouldn't be getting anyway because they're not going to give it to you.
Yeah.
It's going somewhere you don't want it to go, and I kind of think there's much.
I think what's happening is that Western capitalism, particularly the most advanced countries, Europe, Britain, the United States, to some degree Japan, but it's more about Europe and the United States, is shifting its economic structure around certain companies or criteria that are so-called green-based. And even Greta Thunberg and so on are saying, well, this is greenwashing. And I think that's basically true. Even if you accept the arguments about 1%, 1 degree or 2 degree, none of that's ever going to be changed under the rule of the same companies that are suddenly changing their mind. And so it makes me suspicious of how these people might be being manipulated.
Yeah, so I'd say that's a different thing then. I'd say that what we should be protesting against is greenwashing.
But if the prop, if I don't think the prop is accurate, then I can't really justifiably do that. I mean, I would protest with anybody against pollution or against the destruction of the environment. I'll join in with those protests. But I'm not going to say.
I'm worried about the transition.
No, I'm not going to say the science says this. And when people turn around to me and say 97% or 99% of scientists say this, it doesn't impress me. It doesn't impress me. I did a PhD. My PhD is completely contrarian to the existing arguments, not on this issue, but about China. I completely disagree with what 99% of scientologists say. But that's not
misinformation that you're really.
I mean, I'm worried that the attitude of, for example, saying, it's quite loud, the attitude of saying denial. There was a guy earlier on saying that such and such a media is denying it, and it seems to me that the pressure is going on towards the idea that it would be banned to say the opposite.
Yeah,
and that I think.
So it seems to me, if I'm being honest, it seems quite strange because you can protest that. You can protest free speech.
It seems to me a very strange, very important thing to. This has been what I've felt for a while. I'm glad to talk to you because I have wondered whether a lot of people who do what you do in this capacity, if it's more, if you're actually arguing against misinformation and stuff like that.
I mean, I don't know, Piers used to be a councillor in Southwark, and he set up the first major recycling plant in the borough, and based on reuse of waste materials. So he's not opposed to environmental protection measures, but he's arguing that the sun governs the climate, not man. You know, I think that's. I tend in that direction because I saw a debate, for example. If you look on YouTube, you look at where there are actually debates between the leading scientists in the field, and I saw one debate with Patrick Moore and Michael Mann. So Patrick Moore is one of the leading figures he was the head of one of the leaders of Greenpeace, and now he's opposed to the climate change agenda. And Michael Mann made a hockey stick, and so they actually debated with each other, which I think is good. But when I watched that debate, and that was quite early in my investigating these questions, I couldn't help but say, I think Patrick Moore's right. Well, and sometimes these things instinctual. I might be wrong, but sometimes these things are instinctual.
To me, it sounds more like you care about misinformation and the freedom of consciousness than you do about
freedom of science as well.
Yeah, freedom of science, freedom.
Yes.
Than you do about this particular.
Because I don't think it's a true issue. That's why I think it's a misleading issue. I mean, I had the same attitude towards COVID, so it's not like, you know, but I initially started out thinking that a lockdown was correct. I started advocating that very early on, before the government advocated it. I changed my mind by looking at the details and saying, I ended up saying it's complete nonsense. But no matter who you are, I'm sure you know lots of people in Britain now think something is fishy about what we were told about all of this. And so I'm tending in the same direction on this issue.
So anyway, just one more thing, yeah. So I wonder whether that's more to do with the fact that you're really hurt and against misinformation and the freedom that's being anyway.
Thanks very much. What's your name?
Sam. What's yours?
Sam. Okay. Hi. Yeah. Subject access to the YouTube channel. The audio's on, but no video. Yeah. All right.
The farmers are not allowed to grow crops, and they are not allowed to feed their own people. They are dying because of your ideology. You need to get it through your head. The only racist and mass murderers.
We want climate justice.
That equals genocide in the third world.
Not straight in the face. Don't
touch my mic.
Not straight in the face. It's about face. Good try. Take it easy.
We want climate justice.
We don't want it. It doesn't exist.
Right, first of all, don't point it in people's faces.
No, it was about face.
Listen to me. Don't point it in people's faces because they are naturally going to push it away from them, okay? Just do that.
Oh, yeah. I get you've got one to speak. Do what he wants. Don't tell him about there's plenty of
Good job. Let me have a go.
Let me introduce you
to the camera.
Now let me introduce Dr. Hackle so he can carry the debate on.
I can't read.
I know it's kind of heated, but that's the nature of the time of year. I say I know this discussion's a little bit heated, and that's a bit to do with the time of year, but I would ask this. I had some quite good discussions with people just recently. I'd like... Well, that's going to be a little bit quiet. I mean, I'm happy to discuss person to person as well, but the megaphone you can also take. So I would just say this. I've been speaking at Speaker's Corner since 1985, and I believe in free speech and democracy. I believe that the right of people to put their point of view, whether you agree with them or not, exists. The gentleman here is claiming that I turned the Sarah Everard vigil from a peaceful protest into a violent protest. That's not fact. You are basically arguing that the women who are there, which are many, many thousands of women, are manipulated by one man. I think that's a big patronising to the women.
Making a fool of you. That's not free speech.
Patronising to the women.
All you're doing is making a fool of you.
Nonsense. you want to get up and say what you want to say?
No, he can't. No, don't run away.
Well, I don't see what the fool I've made of myself. All I've said so far is I believe in freedom and democracy. I don't see what's foolish about that. So, you're talking to me. You said about me. So if you want to say something, I'm happy for you to say what you're going to say.
You can't obey your own rules, can you? Obey your own rules. Why do you swear at people?
I didn't swear at anybody.
Well, your friends did.
My friend is not me. You said I.
They call me a wanker. They call me.
Well, I mean, you're
standing up to them.
you're not.
You're standing up to get
Yeah, just say he's not one.
I'm standing up here to say that people should be able to discuss the so-called science.
If you believe in flat Earth,
I don't believe in flat Earth, but even people who believe in flat Earth have the right to be heard.
Oh yes.
If you go on the internet, you will find there are plenty of YouTube channels, YouTube programs that talk about flat Earth. If you don't like their point of view, you don't have to watch them. The issue is that I'm concerned about is this. Well, then don't stand next to me then. It's a big square. If you don't want to hear me, you can walk away. If you don't want to hear me, you can walk away. I'm standing here.
Apologise for your mic that swore at me.
Well, I can't apologise for someone else, but if I could, I would. If I could apologise for someone swearing, I would. But I can't apologise on behalf of someone else. I'm sorry.
Are you calling that free speech? To swear
I'm saying what I say. I'm just saying, well, I mean, I apologise on their behalf, but I can't actually apologise for someone else. That's a bit of a demand. But I think the problem with the argument being given by Extinction Rebellion is that they are saying that the news media is not broadcasting the truth about climate change. And they are saying, like I spoke to a young woman earlier on, and she was saying there's 978 days left, that the world's about to be, whatever, destroyed or extinct or whatever. And someone was on the demonstration saying that, and I had a discussion with her, a perfectly reasonable, affable discussion, but I'm asking you this. To what degree do you think alternative views that do not agree with the theory of man-made climate change should be forbidden? Do you think they should be forbidden?
Yeah, but
do you think they should be forbidden?
You should accept that.
Is it a reasonable question to ask?
The script's been given to you by Shell or BP.
No, I haven't got any script by anybody. I'm making it up as I go along. I'm sorry.
Well, we don't believe that.
Who here believes that all opinions that disagree with man-made climate change should be banned? Yes. So how would you implement that ban? How would you implement that ban?
Come on, answer.
So do you want Rishi Sunak to ban it? Or do you want Bill Gates to ban it? Or do you want Google to ban it?
Or you want a
vaccine? Do you believe it should be eliminated?
Or you want a vaccine?
Do you believe that any viewpoint that disagrees with man-made climate change should be deleted from the internet? Do you believe that? Do you believe it? I'm asking you a question. Why are you coming back?
What you don't understand.
It's a perfectly reasonable question, my friend. I don't see why you have to be rude to me.
What you don't understand is we live in a society which has power.
Loudly. We need it.
And those in power.
Loudly.
Those in power.
Loudly, I need it for the meeting. Yeah, that's it.
Actually accept a lot of your arguments because it's in their benefit. It's to benefit them. They don't want to change. They don't want to re-engineer society because it costs the billionaires a lot of money for that. Okay, so it's in their interest to contain our view, and they do it by the commentators that generally are in the press that belittle our views, that make XR look like terrorists. So that's how they do it, and they allow people who are climate deniers full reign.
I don't think you're terrorists. Even the oil companies don't dispute.
There's a couple of points here. It may be that in the past that there was a powerful oil lobby, and like there was a powerful tobacco lobby, which pushed the agenda of saying there is no man-made climate change. It may well be the case. However, I think today the balance is quite the opposite. I think in government, international